Um, my name, my name is Dana, and I'm an occupational therapist in a public school system. I've been working here for more years than I'd like to say. And for the past 10 or 15 years, my caseload has been split between preschool and high school, which is a really unique perspective because I'm able to be part of the students' first journey in their educational setting with students and their families. And then I get them back for their last 4 or 8 years, depending on which track they take, whether they're doing a traditional track and graduate after 4 years, or they're with us for that last 4 years as well. We will keep them until they're 22. So when I started my OTD journey, I really thought that I was headed towards trauma-informed education and a project with our littles, with the preschoolers. And then as I took more of the trauma coursework, I realized that the group that is less talked about and less focused on for trauma is our high school group. And for those kiddos who have, particularly our kiddos with autism spectrum disorder, they're experiencing trauma in their regular education settings as we're trying to include them and get them out of those self-contained settings. And so my focus shifted towards maybe doing a project up here at the high school level. And then I was thinking about what I could do as a project that would really make a difference, because if I was going to spend all these hours working on the project, I wanted it to really make a difference in the end. And right about that time, the chef from our culinary program emailed me and said, can you please come back and help me adapt curriculum for one of our students who has autism spectrum disorder? And I was kind of surprised by it because I had just adapted the program for him the year before. And we had set up a really nice program for him where we split up his 90-minute class block into dining room time and into the kitchen lab time and back to the dining room. And now the chef wanted me to adapt it again. So when I met with him, my question was, we adapted this last year, so what can I do differently this year? And he said, well, I don't know. Can I just use the same approach? Which made me really realize that the chef who is in charge of the culinary arts program had very little experience working with students with autism or really any disabilities. But yet we were taking our life skills students, our students with our most significant challenges who were self-contained, and over again, we were putting them in the culinary program as their out class, as their regular education class. So our CTE programs, which is the culinary arts program, is part of that. The CTE program is designed, it's a Rhode Island program. It's career and technical education pathways. And they're designed so that at the end of 4 years, if a student has been involved in that pathway, that they're expected to be able to enter the field at an entry-level position or to go on to higher education. So particularly for us from Rhode Island, Johnson and Wales is right down the street. They have a very large culinary program. And the students leaving our culinary program often go into something like that, or they go directly into the industry. So I decided that I would try to take my OTD project and use it to develop a curriculum that could run as sort of a sub-curriculum in our culinary arts, in the culinary arts program. So once I settled on that, I started doing the literature review, and I started with just redefining autism for myself because I've been working with children with autism, and actually many of our staff with autism, for so long that I really wanted to stop and come back to the original, or one of the original definitions. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how individuals interact, communicate, learn, and behave. And on top of that, our students with ASD have traditionally different learning styles. And even though our students come to us at all different levels when they come to the high school, those the learning styles remain similar. And the evidence-based practice that we know, the way we know to work with these students to target their learning and really maximize their learning, does work across that spectrum of students on the spectrum. Also in the literature review, taking that my trauma-focused courses, and really looking at students with ASD in particular, it was easy to see that there are things that I never even thought of for trauma in their lives, including medical appointments, medical procedures, sensory stimuli that we know is noxious. And over again, we try to expose our students to this sensory stimuli. But I looked at it from a different perspective, wondering if what we're doing is actually repeatedly traumatizing them through putting them in these classes that are anxiety provoking. The sensory stimuli is anxiety provoking, and there's no real structure for them to understand what they're supposed to be doing, which again would be very anxiety provoking. And then also part of our trauma coursework, looking at COVID, the entire COVID experience for all of us, most of us experienced some kind of trauma, but particularly for our students that needed that true structure and social skills and socialization they were getting in school, that was taken away without any warning at all. And I don't know if all schools were the same, but our high school, we were told to take our things home on a Thursday because we might have some extended time out of school, and that 3 or 4 days turned into a year and a half. And then for some of our students, up to 2 years, depending on when their parents chose to send them back. So being taken out of structure and social time and something they could depend on, and being at home, really isolated in families that were experiencing a ton of stress at the same time. And then our world kind of went virtual. That was a huge trauma experience for our students who are now returning. Also in the literature review, there was quite a bit of work from students with autism that were able to explain that they felt the most comfortable learning and felt the most successful when they were being taught by adults who wanted to try to get to know their learning style and at least attempt to give them what they needed within that coursework. And again, students reported feeling much more positive and successful when they were learning from their peers or through peer modeling or video modeling. The literature review further provided sort of justification for what I was seeing, and I see over and over again, in that students with ASD in particular go on to be employed, live independently, and maintain social relationships at a much lower rate than their peers, even with other disabilities, as well as neurotypical peers. So in my experience, I've had about 25 students with ASD who have graduated since I came to the high school, and only one is employed at this point, and she's employed in a family business, actually, and none of them live independently. So the literature review, the research out there really backed up the fact that this particular group of students struggles when they're leaving the high school setting. One theory behind that is that students with ASD, they're gaining life skills throughout their time in the educational setting as they practice them. And then these skills plateau or decline once they graduate. And that makes it very difficult for them to gain or maintain employment, difficult to live independently. And those social relationships are very hard to access once they leave this ready-made social experience. The final part of the literature review that was kind of new to me is just having me look at barriers to educating students with ASD, because there are things that we interact with every day and I don't actually name them. So seeing them in the literature really made me feel validated that what I was seeing is what's being seen in the greater world, not just here. So some of the barriers are a need to accommodate learning styles, a need to teach social skills, a need to have a teacher who wants to understand and teach these kids, and a need to bring these skills out of the self-contained realm where we try to teach most of them so they can actually be practiced and mastered before students are leaving this educational setting. So what we know from evidence-based practice is the things that work with students with autism, such as preview and practice opportunities, using visual schedules, using visual directions, using video modeling, peer modeling, and creating those safe sensory spaces. Those all also translate into trauma-informed education, because those are the things that make our students feel safe and included, and it makes them feel like they can begin to learn the material that we're asking them to learn. And as they learn it and master it and gain that satisfaction and independence, it continues to help them feel successful. So the strategies that we have been using for students with autism, when we use them successfully, also create that trauma-informed safety and help to support students that way. So the other reason I chose the culinary arts program is because it targets life skills naturally, including personal care, food and nutrition, household management, budget, safety, health, communication, social skills. All of these things are naturally part of the culinary arts program. We start with personal care because we start out with putting on that uniform and that coat that's so difficult to button and get on the right way. We start there and then we work towards all of the sanitation. How do you clean your house? How do you manage your house? Budgeting, how do you go shopping? How do you know what you want to buy when you go shopping? Keeping your body safe, using tools safely, health through good nutrition. And then communication and social skills become a very natural part of the culinary arts program because it's one large open kitchen and there's anywhere from 18 to 24 students going around in the space, and they're all working on different things. So for our kids to be able to access that and start to have conversations with these students really targets those communication and social skills. And I just included in there a quote from AOT: occupational therapy enables people of all ages to participate in daily living. And that's exactly what we're trying to get to through this culinary arts program. So I went ahead and did a needs assessment at the end of last year, and I identified the stakeholders, which really became the administration, the special and regular education teachers, our students with ASD, their families, and the peers within the culinary arts curriculum, and then also the teacher assistants who were charged with bringing 2 or 3 students at a time into this culinary arts class and having them actually do meaningful work. And we conducted the satisfaction survey with the people that were identified, and overwhelmingly they were unsatisfied with the inclusion experience for their students with autism spectrum within that culinary setting, which was not a shock because the program was not really being very functional at that time. So I started developing the program. I met with a special educator and regular educator to identify the skills, just starting with the Q1 culinary arts curriculum. And I was looking for skills that would meet that entry-level employment for food service industry. Our students have community placements, work placements, so I was able to take the job description from that and pull out of it the skills within that first quarter curriculum that would help lead towards, if they were able to master those skills, it would help lead towards that type of employment. Once they were identified, we divided them into 4 units: dressing for culinary arts, sanitation, kitchen navigation, so kitchen scavenger hunts, making sure they knew where all their tools were, they could get them themselves. And then culinary nutrition was our entry level into the food, actually talking about food groups and nutrition. Once I identified those, we broke them down into tasks and skills in a competency-based tracking sheet so that the TAs that were with them could use it. It was very friendly for data tracking, and it helped the TAs and the chef know exactly where our students were on their journey, on their culinary journey, so that if one student was super independent, they could take off and do the work that was set up for them, and the TA still knew where the other students were and could work with them where they were. So an example, then we considered each skill for best practice and trauma-informed teaching strategies. For example, using the culinary lab dishwasher, which is different than anything you've ever used. Each load takes about 10 seconds. So we started with physical demo and visual directions. If that's all they needed, that's where we stopped. If they needed more, we had them practice with a peer because their peers are far better at using all the machinery in there than we are. And then if they still needed more support, we did a video model of them with their peers that they could watch before and they could watch after, just for practice and review. Same thing with a task like making an egg salad sandwich. We started just with visual directions. And then for some students, I really had to consider the sensory impact because eggs are yucky for so many people, including the adults in there, but the way they sound, the way they feel when they're cutting them, the way they smell, we really had to get creative and do some adaptation for stuff like that. So the roadblocks. Dr. Martin already alluded to this, but I went in after creating the whole program this summer and intending to use it during the first quarter so that I could have some data. The chef, I went to talk to the chef and he said, "Oh, this is great, but I think I forgot to tell you I don't have these kids anymore. They're going to be with a different chef, but she'll be thrilled with this." So he brought me over to introduce me to her, and she said, "Yes, this is great. I don't really want it in my course or in my kitchen. I think I can do just fine with these students without having this very structured program." So we took a step back and decided to use it just in the classroom, because the classroom has a full kitchen in it and it mimics a home kitchen. So I said, well, this will help support that continuum of, school to home to community. And we started setting it up that way. And about 4 weeks into the school year, about a week before we were going to start it, the teacher said, "I'm so sorry to do this to you, but I am actually resigning and leaving the district." So we now have long-term subs in the classroom that are not consistent. Some of them are consistent over weeks, but every day is a little bit different. And so we decided that this really wasn't a good place to start the program until we get a consistent staff member in there. So what I was able to do is bring just some of the evidence-based practice into the kitchen on a daily basis. I'd go into Culinary and try to see what they were doing, and then provide the visual supports or whatever I could, visual recipes, whatever I could do to help support them, just using that evidence-based practice that we know works really well for these students. So unfortunately, I had all this great plans for getting results, and I clearly was not able to really get results because I can't do, I had that pre-program survey data, but I didn't do a program, so I don't really have post-program data. However, the conversations have been highly positive. The TAs in particular are very excited because they feel like they know exactly what they're doing with students when I can give them the visual supports. And they feel like students are actually exploring the kitchen for the first time ever. They're going to get their own materials. They're coming back with them. They're not waiting for adults. I think we have a few romances going on because the peers have been super involved and love to work with our kids. So I think some of our kids are in love with a different peer every week. But that just shows the natural progression of that socialization that we can't teach. It has to happen in more of a naturalistic way once they have the basic skills. The limited results I do have, one parent did sign permission for me to track data with her son and share it. And he actually went from being meaningfully involved in the culinary experience last year for about 20 minutes out of a 90-minute class to this year being involved about 65 minutes for the majority of the classes, sometimes the full class, sometimes a little bit less than that. The next steps for this program, we have many CTE programs in our high school. Our brand new high school was built with these programs as our foundation. And 3 programs have approached me now to help bring life skill students into them. They're nursing, automotive, and fashion design, and they each have students in their programs now. And they're doing a terrific job with trying to break these skills down in this competency-based style, so that everybody knows where these kids are and what the next steps are and how they're moving along. And then implications for practice. This is OT. The Culinary Arts program, as well as many of these CTE programs, that it is OT. It's what we do. We are trying to teach skills for the job of living, and being able to adapt as many of these programs as we can allows kids to make true choices for what they want to do during their regular education time, during this vocational time, so that when they leave here, they actually have skills to try to make it through these entry-level positions. It will be exciting to see what happens when we can actually use the program the way it was written. So despite all of the roadblocks, we were able to get a little bit of data, but I'm still excited to see where we can go with the culinary program, but also automotive. Those guys are super excited to have our kids. And then nursing and fashion design have done a lot of work as well. So thank you, particularly to Dr. Martin for talking me off a ledge so many times when I thought my program was dead in the water and not going anywhere. We kept adapting and changing it to make it work. Of course, I want to thank my dad for being a huge support, my partner, my 2 girls who helped me through the entire journey, particularly all of the technology that I needed help with, and my friends who understand every event I left early or missed. You guys are all greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Awesome job, Dana. Thank you. Questions? Anybody have any questions? You can unmute yourself, just give a holler, raise your hand. You can put something in the chat. I'll be checking that too.
I have a question. I always have a question.
I'm ready.
All righty, Dana, wonderful job. And as you were sharing, I kept thinking, well, this is real OT. Yeah, it really is. But yeah. So I guess my question is, this sounds very impressive in the sense of the work that you've done. Do you know if anybody, anyplace else has done anything like this?
I was not able to find anything that has been done like this. A lot of course, the natural progression of OT is to go in and adapt. So I think that's happening probably anywhere that has a program that students are entering in, particularly with that ASD population. And our kids don't all have autism. They have various disabilities, but the strategies worked for all of them is also what I was able to prove with the little bit I did. But nobody seems to have that kind of sub-curriculum and really competency-based learning in place for students. And I had been talking to the rest of our CTE programs for years, and nobody's really been like, yeah, let me try that, until I was able to show that we could create this a system where they would actually be, it would make the students more independent, not more dependent. And now I have 3 more on board. So I was not able to find anything in literature where it's being done at the high school level. It looks like there's a lot of competency-based programs at the secondary when you get into the college programs. So
But you also have this trauma-informed piece. So
yeah.
yeah, have you seen anybody incorporating all of those components? So that's very impressive to do it all.
Yeah, it was well, but I realized that what we do for these students naturally is actually trauma informed, because it decreases their stress so significantly, and they're able to relax and feel safer. But also letting them connect with the chef and I have to admit, for all of our beginnings where she really didn't want me in her classroom, she's been tremendous with our kids, and she's the one that really gets peers involved. She assigns a new peer every week. Well, she offers it to a new peer. She doesn't have to assign. So seeing our kids develop a relationship with her and really feel like they're wanted in that program has been an enormous change. And that does speak to that trauma informed piece.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't think I was going to get to the end a few times, but we were able to keep going down and figuring it out.
Mhm.
So I'll ask you, Dana, what do you feel like, or how do you feel like you're going to move forward with getting that administrative buy-in so that the chef can't come back to you and say, no, I don't want this in my classroom. So kind of going from that different, that hierarchy piece of it.
I have to say my administration has been incredibly supportive. In fact, tonight, as you know, I tried to get on and sort of see how this was going to work, and found out I really didn't have internet. And so I actually called, and my superintendent answered me and said, come into school and use school. And then she actually found me and said, you're going to do great. You've done a lot of work. So I think that the buy-in is there, but it doesn't mean that the teacher is going to accept whatever we want to do. And we've learned that countless times. So it's going to be up to me to figure out how to make it successful first in that life skills program once we have a consistent teacher. And once we show success with that, I think that there's 3 chefs in the program right now. And I think we'll be able to bring it in at whatever level our kids are working at.
That's
Part of
great.
the problem is that our kids are all sent to one class, whatever the level, so they may do 10th grade for 4 years because it has to be during that teacher's prep time. So being able to have them work on their own competencies means that they can work on that through whatever level class they get placed in. And I think that's when we'll actually get the buy-in. It's going to take years. It's not going to be a simple solution.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was impressed by your perseverance of this. And I know a lot of times we had many conversations of, okay, what's next?
Right.
anything I said multiple times, this is going to work. This is going to work. And I think it was just kind of those stepping stones that you created through this project that's going to move it forward and be really meaningful for the students that you're working with and the staff.
And yes, and even the small changes were meaningful. So I think you're right. I think we'll get there.
Yes. Yes, you will. You will. Anyone else have any questions? You've got a lot of so proud of you, Stina.
Thanks, Kenzie. That's my daughter.
Well, thank you, Dina. That was awesome. This is going to be going big places, so that's always fun to see what's going to happen next too. So congratulations. All right, I'm going to stop recording.